Hello and welcome to another LifeTech webcast. My name is Jennifer Poppy and I'm an OT or occupational therapist here at LifeTech in Queensland. Today I'd like to spend some time to talk to you about play and share some ideas for technologies that can be used for different play activities. So here's a quick outline of what we'll cover in the next 20 minutes. Firstly, what do I mean when I talk about play, and why should we care about introducing technology into play? Secondly, I'll go through a couple of theories of play to help give context to the play options later on. I'll also talk a bit about low-tech versus high-tech play options, and when one type might be chosen over another. And lastly, I'll go through a range of different high-tech toys, games and gadgets, and how they might be useful for play. So what do I mean by play? Well, there are many aspects to play, so this isn't so easy to answer. Play can be fun or serious. It can be in groups or alone. It may involve what we think of as toys or games, but it certainly doesn't have to. The main characteristic of play is not its content, but its mode. Basically, play is freely chosen by the person and is not at that time thought of as work. It may also involve some exploration, either of the physical world or of thoughts and ideas. So why do we care about play? Well, play is how children interact and explore the world. OTs like me would say that play is one of the primary occupations of children, in addition to learning as a student. Play is recognised as important for the skill development of younger children, but it is just as important for school-age children. Play complements schooling by providing opportunities for the child to freely explore and give their own meaning to content they had learned in the classroom. It also provides opportunities to develop skills that are rarely focused on in academic settings, such as understanding emotions and building emotional tolerance. Play is very important for bonding and developing trust and shared experiences, both with the child's peer group and within the family. Play is also healthy. Through activity, it can build strength and improve physical fitness. Play can also be great for distracting a person from pain, trauma, or difficult circumstances. Play is even noted in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which has been in effect for more than 25 years. Article 31 states that all parties, that is countries, recognise the right of the child to rest and leisure, to engage in play and recreational activities appropriate to the age of the child, and to participate freely in cultural life and the arts. There are also different theories of play and how it can be categorised. It's helpful to understand at least a couple of these theories when thinking about what sort of games or toys to introduce to a child. One way of categorising play is by the amount of social interaction involved. One theory of this nature is called Parton stages of play. I'll talk a bit about this theory on the next slide. Another way of thinking about play is by the type of activities that are done within the play. I'll go through some commonly mentioned play categories that are defined in this way as well. But first, Parton stages of play. So the stages of play shown here were thought up by Mildred Parton in the 1930s, so this theory is quite old, but it still remains relevant. The stages of play mirror children's social development. As children grow and develop, play evolves, and they are less likely to engage in earlier forms of play, and more likely to engage in the later ones down the bottom. Even as adults, we still engage in all of these forms of play. We tend to encourage children to develop play skills so that they can participate in complex cooperative play. Having said this, there's nothing wrong with playing by ourselves, but it doesn't require the same level of social skill as, say, cooperative play. Also, when we're sick, tired, or stressed, we often prefer forms of play from the earlier stages, since they are less complex. So the first three categories are pretty self-explanatory. Parallel play is a little bit trickier. It's where a child plays next to other children and maybe mimics their play, but doesn't really interact with them. Associative play starts when children become more interested in other children than in most of the toys, and start attempting to socialise. Children within this play group have similar goals, but do not have set rules, and there's no formal organisation. Cooperative play is, in the sense of these stages, the most socially advanced form of play. So this is where established rules and guidelines are followed as a group. Cooperative can also mean competitive, so kids can compete against each other, for instance, but they do so using a shared set of rules. The shared set of rules is the most important thing. So you will notice in subsequent slides when I talk about specific toys and games that these icons will pop up again, and this is to remind you that they can be used for this type of play. Play can also be categorized according to the type of activity that is being performed. These are some of the more common terms for play activities, but there are plenty more. None are best, but different types of play promote different types of skill development, so it's important that kids get a chance to play regularly in all categories. Again, I'll be referring to these categories as I go through technology options for play. So where does technology fit into this picture? Before we go on to talk about high-tech play options, I wanted to clarify that there is nothing wrong with simpler or low-tech play options. In fact, sometimes these low-tech options are preferred. There is lots of evidence out there to suggest that more generic items like boxes and blocks can provide a broad range of play opportunities and may also encourage children of different skill levels to play cooperatively together. Also, if they break, they can be replaced fairly cheaply. On the other hand, high-tech toys are generally more limited in what they can be used for. They also tend to require more maintenance. Their batteries need charging or replacing, they break more easily, and playtime may be determined by battery life. Having said this, it's good to think of high-tech play options as another tool in your toolbox. They are often highly engaging and motivating for children, and kids generally think they're cool, so will choose to play with them. They can also provide alternative forms of access to a play format when it would be difficult to access a real-world form. For instance, if a child is stuck in bed, a video game they can play with their friends is a form of play that is both acceptable in this environment and able to be accessed from the bedside. High-tech options can also give parents with a disability more options for actively playing and bonding with their children. If the tech toy is digital, it can also be possible to adjust sensory output like volume or brightness. It might also include feedback like vibration. These features can be particularly useful for children with a sensory impairment or sensory sensitivity. I'll go through some more potential benefits of individual tech options as we talk about them. So here are some examples of high-tech toys and games that we'll talk about. As we go through each section, I'll talk about how the toys might be used and when a child might especially benefit from playing with them. So let's start from the basics and move to more complex games. Cause and effect games are perhaps the first type of play that's really intentional. The child knocks over the bear, and music plays. Lots of interactive baby toys encourage this sort of play. For kids who can't physically operate store-bought toys, this is still an important type of play they need to experience. For these kids especially, Switch toys are a great idea. Switch toys are basically interactive toys that have been modified to take an external input from a switch. For example, a big button that's easy to hit and can be positioned anywhere a child can intentionally move. Press the switch and the music plays. Switches come in all shapes and sizes and can be found to listen for almost any intentional movement, even just twitching a muscle. Many battery-operated toys can be modified for switch access. Otherwise, if the toy is simple to activate, it might be possible to temporarily adapt a toy using a battery compartment interrupter. When the switch is held down, the toy is activated, so when the switch isn't pressed, nothing happens. This can be great for, say, bubble machines and some singing and dancing toys. There are also cause and effect games for the computer or tablet to make something happen on screen. These may be compatible with a switch or with other computer control options, such as using an eye gaze system. Moving from simple sensory toys, digital puzzles and mazes can remove some of the physical challenge of these activities while keeping all the visual perceptual challenges. For example, instead of needing to pick up tiny puzzle pieces and carefully put them in place, on a screen you can simply drag with your finger or a mouse cursor and the piece can snap into its slot. Puzzles and mazes can sometimes be switch adapted to scan through the empty spaces or directions, and then the person can press a switch to select the correct space. And don't forget, although we typically think of puzzles as solitary activities, it is possible to play as a small group or to do separate puzzles, but talk and share ideas at the same time. So we can do puzzles by ourselves or with help. Like with mazes and puzzles, other tabletop games can also have a high-tech component. Board games and card games are usually played with another person or against a computer. These games are good for learning rules, making decisions, and following patterns. There are also dice rolling products that can be used in conjunction with traditional board games or pen and paper games such as Dungeons and Dragons. This can help a person be more involved in play if they can't roll themselves. There are Switch-adapted dice poppers for real dice, or smartphone apps to use as many dice and dice combinations as you want. Some apps also automatically add up numbers. Art is another popular pastime among both children and adults. So if a child can't hold a pencil or use a paintbrush, it's important to find other ways for them to do this. One way is to motorize an item in the real world. For example, a color bug is a little remote-controlled bug that holds a pen and draws over the page as a user drives it with a switch. An Etch-a-Sketch can create drawings in a similar way. The limitations to this sort of drawing is that you can't really lift your pencil or change colors. Motorized art easels are more popular among adults, but are super relevant for kids who have limited range of motion. Using switches again, the user can move the easel up or down, left or right, and can therefore position the paper or canvas exactly underneath their pencil or paintbrush. Digital art is very easy to introduce to a person. So long as they can access a touch screen or move a computer cursor, they can engage in art. One really nice feature of art programs is the undo button, which doesn't really exist in the real world. Digital photography and videography are also nice creative options. A camera can be mounted onto a wheelchair, onto a helmet, or attached to a body part if they're unable to hold the camera properly, and the person can use a remote trigger or a switch to capture images. Cameras can also be mounted onto a remote-controlled vehicle or a robot to help someone capture images from angles they would not usually be able to get to. Remote-controlled toys are another play option. These are great for kids who like to race or perform tricks for their friends, but may not be so safe to do so themselves. For instance, we discourage kids from doing donuts in their wheelchairs, but doing donuts with a remote-controlled truck is perfectly fine. Of course, the less breakable the better, since it will probably be crashing into walls and other objects. Also, the more battery life, the better. So radio frequency toys are most common. The controllers for these toys are usually hard to modify, but there are some more basic models that can be adapted for switch access. Other toys are controlled by Bluetooth, which means that they can be controlled directly through a smartphone. For example, Sphero is a little remote-controlled ball that can race, navigate mazes, run over ramps, and even swim in still water. There are also some spy toys, which are usually a kind of remote-control vehicle with an integrated camera. They often have night vision too, so the kid can sneak around the home to spy on their friends, their parents, tease their cat, all sorts of things. There are also little remote-controlled planes and even propellers that can be attached to a paper plane to let it fly by itself. I must warn you, they can be a bit hard to drive. They do take practice. Remote-controlled flying drones or quadcopters are also popping up all over the place. And although they are probably too expensive and fragile to give to a younger child, a teenager might have fun with building it, performing tricks, and maybe doing some aerial photography. The biggest problem with Bluetooth is that its range is about 30 meters or so. So if the toy gets further than, say, 20-25 meters, you may have to go and rescue it. Lastly, if a toy has a remote control like a TV remote that you point directly at the toy for it to work, it's likely that it uses infrared. If so, it can be relatively easy to record the infrared signal for each command on the remote and use it with an alternative controller, such as an environmental control unit, which is what's in some more advanced power wheelchair controllers. One thing I think is great about RC toys is that they can be used in the context of other play. The dump truck can move loads of blocks from one place to another. The car can have a driver inside that interacts with others, or the dinosaur can be the main villain that the others have to keep away from. In addition to remote-controlled vehicles, there are also ride-on vehicles. There are some motorized ride-on toys out there pre-made, but it's also possible to convert them from a wheeled push toy or similar. Some people also adapt a ride-on vehicle into a sort of early form of wheelchair. The drive controls can be left as is or adapted with switches, and additional postural supports can also be added. Though definitely not a throwaway item, these toys can be great for roleplay or even just for some early mobility experience, since they are a cheaper option than a power wheelchair and a bit less confronting for parents of young children. They can also be a nice option for kids who would like to better keep up with others during play. Apart from remote-controlled toys and ride-on vehicles, there are also robot toys and kits. Some robotics kits are designed especially for children to build, create, and learn how robots work. Robots can also be used in competitions that test how well they follow lines, complete tasks, or in sumo-style competitions like the one under in the picture, where the objective is to push another robot out of a ring. Some robot kits will just work when the pieces are joined together, but for most robotics projects, kids will at least need to do a little bit of coding, so this might be better suited to older kids, say ages 10 and up. For some kids, nothing really beats more physical games. But what happens when typical sports, or even tag, isn't an option? Well, there are games like air hockey. Since the puck rests on a table, it doesn't require as much movement against gravity as, say, table tennis, where you may have to reach high to hit the ball. The mallets can also be adapted in size or shape to make things easier or harder for the competitors. Pinball is similar to air hockey in that it is played on the tabletop and doesn't require mobility over a large space. There are also computer versions of these games. Hover soccer and hover bowling are a bit like air hockey for the floor. They use a disc that floats on a cushion of air when the battery is turned on. This disc requires little strength to get moving and doesn't move quite so fast as a soccer ball, so it's easier to get to. It also has soft bumpers on the sides, so the game can be played indoors or hit against someone's legs without too much issue. And of course, there are laser tag games. Compared with, say, Nerf guns, you don't have to pick up the old ammo and reload the gun, which can be hard for a person with limited balance or reach. It also has limited contact between players, so it's okay for more fragile children, or conversely for kids who could be too rough with others. These games use infrared light to tag other players, so it can also be possible to program the IR signal into an ECU system, like we spoke of with remote-controlled vehicles. And of course, last but not least, we have video games. I particularly like video games for their potential to even the odds when it comes to physical ability. Everyone's really just moving a cursor and hitting buttons. Game types and game accessibility are topics for a whole other webcast, so I'll go through things only briefly here. There are many types of games. Some, like the board games and puzzles we spoke of earlier, are digital forms of games that exist in the real world. Sports games are also in this category. Then there are other competitive games, which, like real-world games and sports, have a specific goal and various obstacles that need to be overcome. Most of the time, these games require quite a bit of quick thinking and quick button pressing. Other games are less competitive and more focused on telling a story, letting a player discover the world, or encouraging them to interact with others and play pretend. Many of these are called role-playing games or sandbox games. But there are other types of games that also have capacity for this sort of play. There are also special games designed for therapy, such as to improve range of motion, improve midline crossing, or develop specific object tracking skills. Timoko is one such system which uses a webcam and different coloured gloves to track a user's hand movements in space. The Microsoft Kinect and Nintendo Wii have also been used for this sort of therapy. Ideas in the digital medium are always changing, and more games and toys are popping up every day. If you do see something new, have a quick look to see whether it might be something that can be used or adapted for use in play with people with a disability. So by now you should have a general understanding of what sorts of high-tech toys and games are out there and how they might be used to promote play for children with all sorts of abilities. Thanks for watching. If you do have any questions or would like some help finding or adapting play for Access, please feel free to contact LifeTech here in Queensland, Australia. Also, feel free to visit us in one of our showrooms in either Brisbane or Townsville, or sign up for one of our workshops for parents or service providers. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something new.